you give advice and strategy to people who follow you on Facebook?
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. And how do you advertise? How do they find out about you? Just through ads on Facebook or
Facebook?
Word of mouth?
I don't do too many ads, but Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. I used to Periscope quite a bit. I haven't done that in a while, but yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah.
Very good.
Well, thank you.
And did I remember you mentioning, do you specifically focus on non-traditional students?
Primarily on non-traditional students. That's who I tend to attract. So, you know, I figured, you know what, if I'm attracting them, that's probably who I should be helping. I certainly was a non-traditional student, so that really helps me. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Very good. Well,
Awesome.
we like non-traditional students.
Good. Awesome. All right, we're going to go live. Okay. All right, and here we are. Okay. So what you see is just me. However, if you're on Facebook right now, and I think we have 5 viewers already on Facebook, we have some RSVPs. I think we had about almost 20 people who RSVP'd, and then about like other people who, I think maybe 11 more people were interested in coming. So the views are going up right now as we speak. But I want to just welcome, you, Dr. Quinn Capers, the fourth. That's a very prestigious name there.
Thank you very much.
So I want to welcome you and thank you so much for taking your time to, basically talk with me, talk with the pre-meds in my group about what it takes basically to get into medical school. Dr. Quinn Capers basically is the Associate Dean for Admissions at the Ohio State University College of Medicine. Is that how you're supposed to say it?
You said it. That's perfect. You're going to get an A. You said it just right.
Awesome. And you're also, tell us a little bit about yourself, not just the admission side, but I also know that you are an interventional cardiologist. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yep. So I'm an interventional cardiologist, which, as you know, means I'm a cardiologist who specializes in basically opening blocked arteries in the heart. We do that with balloons, stents, lasers, other devices. We are the ones that treat the heart attacks. So the patients come in with the big heart attacks, which is because the artery has completely closed. We're the ones that get up in the middle of the night and go in and open those arteries up. So it's a real blast, and I love cardiology. Awesome. So about half my time is clinical, interventional cardiology at Ohio State. And about the other half of the time, I'm doing a medical school admissions.
Awesome. Now, can you share with us how you got into doing admissions? That's one of the things I think the medical student, the pre-med students, I should say, might want to be interested in at some point in their careers once they go into medical school, graduate from residency. How does one just, become an admissions director or associate director?
Yeah, so that's a great question. For me, it was unexpected. It was really not a part of the plan. When I graduated from my residency and fellowship programs, I initially went into what you and I and everybody else refer to as private practice.
Okay.
So I was in private practice, which for your viewers who may not understand that distinction, those are the doctors who are maybe entrepreneurial. They own their practice or a share of their practice. And essentially, most of their time, 90% or more of their time, is taking care of patients. I mean, that's what they do.
Right.
Probably most of the doctors you saw growing up were probably in what we call private practice. The other option, or one other option, is what we call academic medicine. And these are the doctors who work at medical schools and university hospitals. And they take care of patients, but they also have some other responsibilities such as teaching and usually some expectation for scholarly activity, research, writing papers.
Right.
So I initially was in private practice, but I really missed teaching. So after 8 years of private practice, I got a job at my medical school alma mater, Ohio State, which is the Ohio State, as you said, as you so correctly said. And after a couple of years I guess the students thought I was doing a good job. I was getting teaching awards. The former admissions dean left, and there was an opening, and one of my colleagues, actually the diversity dean, said, hey, Quinn, I think you would be good for this. You ought to apply. And my initial reaction was that, no, that's not a part of the plan.
Right.
And as we know, successful people plan 2, 3, 4 steps ahead.
Yeah.
So I had this master plan, and this was not a part of it. So initially I said, no, I don't, that's not the plan. I'm just going to be the best interventional cardiologist I can be. And then I thought on it. I thought on it for about 2 or 3 nights, and then I said, well, what we all want to do is have impact. And of course, as a practicing physician, you are impacting every patient that you can physically touch. But I said, running the admissions program at one of the largest medical schools in the country, where we accept 200 future doctors every year, well, you can't beat that for impact. So I thought about it and kind of in my head kind of talked myself into throwing my hat in the ring, and I did, and then the rest was, as they say, history. So it's really very enjoyable for me. So that I kind of backed into it or lucked into it, if you will. But for people who are interested in that, for me, as in my story, it all started with a love of teaching. So first, if you want to be an admissions dean in a medical school, you have to be, as we just said, working in academic medicine, and then just take the opportunity to teach every chance you get. It really was my teaching accolades that opened this door for me.
Right. Well, thank you for sharing that. That's really an important distinction that I think a lot of our students don't really understand, the kind of just private practice or just hospital practice versus the academic side of medicine. So thank you so much for sharing that. One of our viewers, Janelia Dolly, says that she's extremely excited because she's extremely interested in your school. So
excellent, very good, very good.
That works really, really well. Awesome. Now, the reason that I invited you on here is because I get a lot of questions, particularly from non-traditional pre-med students, asking about what does it take? What can I do to possibly get into medical school? And we encounter non-traditional students, I'm sure you have as well, that become non-traditional for different reasons. So, could be academic, could be they're changing careers, could be they just delayed their education for any particular reason. I've gotten a lot of questions that I'm going to kind of throw in to our discussion. But can you tell me how the Ohio State University welcomes non-traditional students? Is that a demographic that they're interested in?
Absolutely, yes. So our medical school, and really like a lot of others now, when you think about our instruction, how we teach our future doctors, while we still have lectures, we have fewer than we used to, but what we have a lot more of than traditional medical school curricula had is small group learning, small group discussions. And with those small group discussions, we not only discuss clinical cases, a patient comes in with these symptoms, this is what the x-ray shows, what do you want to do next? We do a lot of that. But we also discuss things like healthcare disparities, healthcare reform, medical ethics. And those groups are of 12 students and 1 faculty preceptor. And you can imagine if everyone in that group is a 21-year-old who just graduated from college, then the conversation will be a certain way.
Right.
But imagine now you throw in somebody who's worked as an engineer for 10 years, they've been out in the real world, and now they're coming back to medical school, or somebody who took some time off to take care of a family member, or someone who decided late that they wanted to go into medicine. That can really spice up the conversation, and all of our students really benefit from that. So not that we put the burden on our non-traditional students to be teachers, but it helps with diversity.
Right.
It's an important kind of diversity. So diversity is not just race and gender and sexuality, etc. It's diversity of your pathway. And so we welcome non-traditional applicants because we think it makes our discussions more interesting. And when our discussions are more interesting, it helps us develop more interesting doctors.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, I think that's a very important thing for, you see what's in the background.
Yes, very nice. This is real.
This is real. That's right. This is not scripted. But I think that's really important, what you mentioned, because oftentimes I get the question, am I too old to go to medical school? Does someone who is married, will they do well in medical school? Is that really something that medical schools want, or do they see parenting potentially even as a distraction? And I think it's really important what you mentioned, is that you're bringing your experience to the table.
Yes, and it's definitely value added. And regarding the family, if you're a parent or a spouse, first of all, realize that when you are interviewing for medical school, nobody should be asking you about that.
Right.
Yeah, so nobody should be asking you, do you have kids? Are you engaged? Are you going to get married?
Right.
Now, I will say this, if you bring it up, then you open the door for them to ask you follow-up questions.
Yeah.
But just being somebody who didn't do the traditional path, who didn't graduate from college and a few months later start medical school, that adds value because it enriches the discussion. And so we seek that out. Now, sometimes people do worry about age. About people, I don't mean the admissions committee. I mean the students themselves. But you know what? Don't let anybody stop you from your dream. The average doctor these days works, about 30 to 40 years. Last year we had a student applying that was 42. 42 years old and got accepted and is doing just fine in our medical school. So don't let anybody put limits on what you want to do.
Right. So for all you 27-year-olds that contact me, oh, Dr. Darko, I'm so old. I'm like, okay.
42. We have a first medical student who's 42 years old.
Right. I mean, I often say, the oldest person in my class was actually 50 years old. And when we went to our reunion, our 10-year reunion, okay, I'm sure, people were like 50 years old. But when we went to our 10-year reunion, she had no regrets. And she's still practicing. So
very good. Yes, excellent. That's a good example.
Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm. Now, we talked a little bit about the non-traditional pre-med student who, is maybe married or just has, outside experience. Let's talk a little bit about the pre-med student, the non-traditional pre-med who becomes non-traditional perhaps for an academic reason, because that's the big one. Yeah. Now the views are going up on Facebook. The views are going up. So, we have obviously some academic challenges at times. I know certainly I was a student who, when I went to college, I probably wasn't necessarily ready to be full-blown pre-med. And so I had some academic challenges myself. What is your encounter with those types of students, and what is kind of your advice to those students?
So if you've got the fire inside you that you want to be a doctor, then you just have to be methodical and come up with a strategy that works for you. Mm-hmm. So whether you are traditional or non-traditional, you have to convince the medical school admissions committee that you have the academic prowess to be successful in medical school. Admissions committees don't want to accept somebody who a year or 2 or 3 years later is going to wind up leaving medical school.
Right.
And that might seem, when you're on the end of it as somebody's trying to get in medical school, you might not pay attention to that. But I can tell you, having to sit down in a one-on-one meeting and talk to a student who just isn't making it, who's being dismissed from medical school, and the tears are flowing, and they've got maybe now $80,000 worth of student loan debt. It is not, you want to avoid that at all costs.
Right.
So the burden is on you if you're applying to medical school. You've got to demonstrate, you've got to have some example that says, hey, I can do this. I can do this. And so we have a lot of students who had a rocky start. Like you were just saying, somebody who may be, a common thing that we see is that these students are so smart in high school that they were able to, in high school, wait until, tell me if this sounds familiar, wait until the night before the test,
briefly
look at everything, and then the next day get an A on the test. And they were
cool.
able to do that all the way through high school. Then they get to their freshman year in college
and try to do the same thing.
And it's a rude awakening. And by the time they realize, this isn't working, now they've got some damaging grades on their transcript, which kind of tanks their GPA. But you can recover from that. So first of all, on the medical school application, the American Medical College Application Service application, your GPA is displayed in several ways. It shows us your science GPA, your all other, and then your cumulative GPA.
Right.
And it shows us all three of those by year. Your freshman year, sophomore year, junior year, senior year. So when we see somebody who, let's say, their overall GPA is, say, 3.0, which from medical school you should know and you probably know is relatively less competitive.
Mm-hmm. But if we look
at that spreadsheet and it says freshman year it was 2.5, sophomore year it was 2.9, junior year it was 3.5, and it was 3.6 the senior year, but it all adds up to a 3.0.
Right.
Well, that's somebody that we will say, well, okay, so they had a rocky start, but they caught on. They figured out how to be a good student. Mm-hmm. And we would pay, in an example like that, we would pay more attention to those latter years.
Right.
Let's take the example of somebody who they never figured it out in college, but they, graduated. They went on to work, and now they're really bitten by that bug. They want to be a doctor. For students who then come back like that, again, you've got to demonstrate that you can handle medical school level work.
Right.
So for a lot of students, a good idea when they come back like that, and let's say the first time they went to college, they don't feel like that showed their potential.
You got a choice now.
You can either do a full-time post-baccalaureate program, or but we actually like these one-year master's degree programs. Mm-hmm. Students will often ask, will that make up for a lackluster college GPA from years ago? And yes, it will. Mm-hmm. So in fact, if we see somebody who went to college, did their 4 years, got their bachelor's degree, but had a GPA that's not competitive, then they did something else and came back and said, I still want to be a doctor, and then did a master's program and got a 3.8.
Right.
We're going to pay more attention to what's more recent.
Right.
Now, because then they would have demonstrated it. Now, on their personal statement, they would need to go into it because, you'll be asked that. If you get an interview, somebody will ask you, they say, well, hey, what happened? What happened in college? Take me through your journey. So you go ahead and put that down on your personal statement. You don't need to take up the entire personal statement with that, but a paragraph explaining that will be very helpful.
Right. And we're getting a lot of comments. Obina is talking about, she said that was me when we're talking about kind of the academics. Courtney also says that was her as well. And I have one student, Belle, who says that unfortunately she had a downward trend, I guess, going from college and then, continuing on, that her college trend was actually a downward spiral. So she's maybe someone who you would recommend going to a special master's program and kind of demonstrating again that she's proficient at taking higher level courses.
I would recommend that. And also to do some soul searching and some problem solving to try to figure out why. Why did you have that downward spiral? Is it because of increasing responsibilities outside the classroom? Is it because you were not inspired? Is it because your teachers didn't get you excited? I mean, try to find out what was the problem. Do some problem solving there. And then when you feel like you figured it out, you got to make a change.
Right.
If you really want to get into medical school.
Right. Oh, I'm sorry, Obina. Obina is a he. I'm sorry. I didn't even realize. I saw a picture. The picture looked a little, he has a drawing on there, but I actually spoke with Obina, so I definitely know he's a he. He has a very, deep voice.
Okay. He's a manly man.
He's a manly man. Awesome. Now, when we're talking about academics, obviously that usually transcend into Mcat scores.
Yes.
And that's a question that I get over and over and over again about, how many times should I take the Mcat? How many times is too many times to take the MCAT? What is the MCAT score that potentially would make a school look at a student, and how does that compare with the GPA? I get a lot of questions about that, and I often say it depends. What's your take on the MCAT score?
Yes. So I like your answer. It depends.
It depends.
So first of all, when we're talking about the relative strength, the relative weight given the GPA or the MCAT, they both have different strengths. So the MCAT is a good measure of your test-taking ability and how well you do with standardized tests. Now, most of the medical school exams that you're going to have are using that format. And as you and I know, when you get over the hump of that MCAT, it's not over.
Right.
It's just starting. You're just getting started. So at the end of your second year, you're taking U.S. Medical Licensing Examination Step 1. In your fourth year, you're taking Step 2. In your internship year, you're taking Step 3. And then whatever you specialize in, you're taking your specialty boards. And every 10 years, you're retaking those.
Exactly.
So, and how you do on the MCAT, and actually, we don't talk about this as much, but you can really get a hint from somebody's ACT or SAT. So how you do, essentially the way you do on standardized tests is a good predictor on how you do on standardized tests.
Right.
The difference might be that sometimes for the ACT and SAT, people don't really prepare for them. Some people just kind of walk in to take.
Right.
But for the ones you prepare for, if you prepare for the MCAT, and then take it, that's actually a decent predictor of how you're going to do on Step 1 and Step 2 and Step 3. So the strength of the MCAT is it lets medical school admissions committees know how well you do on standardized tests. Now, that's different, though, than the information we get from the GPA. The GPA gives us more information about the long haul, about your work ethic.
Right.
The MCAT is 1 day. It's 1 day, and sometimes we say anybody can step up to the plate and hit a home run on 1 day, or strike out in 1 day.
Right.
But your GPA is now, that's telling us how you do week in, week out, month in, month out, semester in, semester out, year in, year out. So a very strong GPA. So let's talk about some discrepancies we might see. Very strong GPA with a not competitive MCAT. What does that tell us? That tells us that this is a good student. But standardized tests are not their strength.
Right.
Now, depending on how bad the MCAT is, that may be enough to keep you out of medical school. What about the other way around, somebody whose GPA is mediocre or less than mediocre, but they really killed the MCAT? That tells us they're a good standardized test taker, but there might be some questions about your work ethic. So this is somebody who was coasting. But then they really hit it hard in their MCAT prep, and they got a really good score on the MCAT.
Right.
But why weren't they preparing that hard
the whole time?
Sophomore, junior, and senior years.
Right.
Yeah. So obviously the best of both worlds is to have a strong GPA and a strong MCAT.
Absolutely. I mean, that's a discussion that we have over and over again, time again. Actually, I did a consultation with a student yesterday, and I'll give you her scenario. We have a bunch of questions, which I promise, guys, I will get to. But I had a scenario with a student yesterday who had a between 3.6 and a 3.8 GPA. It escapes me right now. But she took the MCAT 3 times. And the highest that she's gotten on the MCAT was the last time, which was a 498. And I mean, what would you say to that student? Because her question was, well, should I apply this year or should I retake the MCAT?
So third time taking the MCAT, typically we say, in general, before you take the MCAT a third time, there needs to be some major change, as in some more initials behind your name, like another degree.
Right.
One mistake, and I hope we'll get to a point where we just talk about common mistakes that we see.
Yeah.
But a common mistake that we see is that people treat the MCAT the way high school seniors treat the ACT.
Right.
And as you and I know, you can take the ACT 20 times. You can just walk in cold and take it so you can get a feel for it. and then say, okay, now I know what it's like. I'm going to take it again. I'm going to take it again. Mm-hmm. And you can take it 20 times and only send in to the colleges the one that you like, your best one.
I've seen that as well. Mm-hmm.
Yes. So, but the Mcat is made by the same people that make the primary application service.
Right.
So you don't get a choice with the Mcat. Every time you take it, it's going to show up on your application.
That's right.
So to take it cold to see what it's like is a very, very bad idea. That's a very bad idea to do that. And so just like that ACT, sometimes people think, well, let me just keep taking it,
mm-hmm.
and just by repetition, I'm going to get better.
Right.
No, this is a test where you really have to prepare.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have really prepared your best when you take it the first time and you didn't get the score you want, don't just reflexively sign up to take it again. That's where you got to do some problem solving. Why didn't I get a better score?
Correct.
What was my weak point? Did I run out of time on the test? Is my pace too slow?
Mm-hmm.
Did I not do enough questions? Really do some problem solving and some more prep. I think all too often we see somebody that takes the Mcat, they don't like their score, so they just take it again a month later. They don't like that score. They take it again a month later. And 3 scores in a row that are essentially the same, that's not something that we like to see.
Right.
Now, if someone's taken the Mcat 3 times and they go up every time,
mm-hmm.
then that's good. Then I'll pat them on the back and shake their hand. They did a good job. But you remember, you can always go down too. It can go the other way.
Right.
So when students ask me, should I retake the Mcat, my question is for them to really do some soul searching, and I ask them, tell me about your preparation.
Mm-hmm.
And if they tell me, I'll give you an example. If they tell me I signed up for Kaplan, but I didn't really have time. It was in the middle of the semester. I had papers to write. I had homework.
Mm-hmm.
And I had this grand plan that I was going to study 6 months in advance, 4 hours a night, but that just kind of fell apart.
Mm-hmm.
And I got a job where I worked 20 hours a week.
Right.
So should I take it again, Dr. Capers? So my question is, have those conditions changed? If those conditions are the same, if you're still working 20 hours a week, if it's still the middle of the semester, if you still don't have time to go to the Kaplan course, then no, you should not take it again until those conditions change. On the other hand, if somebody tells me I gave it everything I've got, I mean, I really cannot imagine studying any harder than I studied, and I got this 498. Should I take it again? My answer to them truly is probably not.
Right.
If you know you gave it your very best shot, if you can't imagine anything that you could do differently, like I can't study more, I took Kaplan or I took Princeton, I can't. There's nowhere I can go. I took all of the practice MCATs. I did everything I could do, and this 498 is what I got.
Right.
Then that probably is you.
Right.
You probably should go with that and go ahead and apply.
Right.
If you got a 498, which is on a little low, it's not terrible. But if you got a 498 and you know that you can ramp it up, that you can do more in your prep, then by all means prepare to take it again.
Right.
But be sure to give yourself time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for that. And I think you definitely have touched on a lot of points. I think that I've certainly talked with my students about, is this the best that do you think that this is the best that you're going to get? What's your process? What's your strategy? And you and I actually talk a lot about strategies, which we'll get into. But, I talk about strategy being the path to medical school. It's not, it's not this grand, just desire to go to medical school that's going to all of a sudden float you there. It really is about preparation, strategy, reflection, doing things differently, keeping what's working the same, and just looking at your situation and being very honest with yourself and saying, this is what is working and this is what is not, which I think is hard for people sometimes, So
it is because these are smart people who were successful in high school. They were, for the most part, successful in college.
Right.
And it can be frustrating when doing the same thing they've always done is not working.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, you talked a little bit about kind of what are some common mistakes. that people make when approaching the medical school application process. What are some of the most common mistakes that you've seen?
So one of them that we were just talking about, let me expand on that a little bit, and that is taking the Mcat before you are really ready. We spend, so at the Ohio State University College of Medicine, we actually, our rejection letter invites you to call us and make an appointment, but we will go through with you where we think you had weaknesses.
Good.
And I can tell you there are many times when somebody had, say, an Mcat that is what kept them out of medical school. And I'll ask them about their Mcat prep, and it sounded like they didn't really study well, they didn't really give it what they had, and they deep down felt like they weren't ready.
Right.
And I'll ask them, well, why did you take it? And very often, you know what I hear? It's odd. It's peer pressure.
Right.
Because everybody else was taking it.
Right.
Because freshman year, I made a pact with my pre-med friends that, okay, we're all going to take the Mcat junior year, and we were pushing each other, and we were study buddies. And junior year came, and we all signed up for the Mcat in April. And I didn't really feel ready, but I didn't want to tell them that I didn't feel ready. I didn't want to be the one that didn't take it. So I went ahead and took it anyway.
Right.
Mistake. If you find yourself in that situation, then you cheer your friends on and tell them, good luck, guys. I'm not ready.
Right.
I need another 2 or 3 months.
Yeah.
But good luck to you. But I really need to take my time, and I just need a little more time.
Right.
So that is a common mistake, taking the Mcat before you're really ready to give it your best shot.
Right.
And this thought of doing a practice run or let me see what it feels like, and then I'll take it seriously, that sometimes is a fatal flaw.
Yeah.
Another mistake that we commonly see is not applying to enough schools. So as you and I know, the average number of schools that the student who is successful at getting into medical school applies to is 16. So under no circumstances should you apply to fewer than 16. And so when I'm having those counseling sessions with students that didn't get in, very often I'll ask them, how many schools you apply to? 4, 5, 6, and you know it's again bringing those habits from that strategy from being a high school senior applying, because the average number of colleges that the high school senior applies to is 5.
Right.
So people are thinking, well, I applied to 5 colleges and it worked out, so I'll apply to 5 medical schools. That is a big mistake. That can be a fatal flaw, because often with those students that I'm talking to, as I'm reviewing their application, I'm thinking to myself, this person should be in medical school somewhere.
Right.
But they just didn't apply to enough schools.
Yeah. And unfortunately, I have that discussion with a lot of students, that why are you not in medical school? And inevitably, I get a story about I had a student apply to one school. He got an interview, believe it or not, got an interview, but didn't get in. And I was like, why are you not in medical school right now? But unfortunately, that's a too often, given story.
That's unfortunate with your student, because if he or she got an interview, that means they're competitive.
Right.
So, and so your viewers and listeners need to know medical school is so competitive that very often you might look at the complete file of somebody that got in and somebody that didn't, and you might not be able to tell the difference between those two. I mean, that's just how competitive it is.
Yeah.
So you need to tilt the balance in your favor by applying broadly.
Right.
Don't apply to 3 or 4 or 5 schools. It should be 16. And if there's something about your application that might make it less competitive, that number might need to be 20, 25, or 30. It's not unusual for California students. California is a state with the most pre-meds and relatively few medical schools. Many California students apply to 30 or 40 medical schools.
Yeah. Yeah.
So taking the Mcat before you are really ready to give it your best shot, not applying to enough schools. For reapplicants, another very common thing we see is reapplying
too soon.
Very often, let me take your viewers through this. The applications open up in June. So the first time you can submit is the first week of June. Interviews usually start in the fall, September, October. And many medical schools will, the cream of the crop will get accepted and the lot will be deferred or put on a waiting list. And it's the spring when April 30th is when students who have more than one acceptance have to drop all acceptances but one.
Right.
So you can be floated on that deferred list or wait list until the spring, and then you might finally find out in April that you've been rejected.
Right.
Now, if you're rejected in April, and the next cycle opens up in June, if the reason that you were rejected is because they saw some flaws in your application or some weaknesses in your application, what I want to ask your viewers, is that 2 months enough time to address that?
Correct.
No.
Probably not.
Under most circumstances, the answer is no.
Right.
If you didn't get in because they thought you didn't do enough community service, you're not going to correct that in 2 months.
Right.
If you didn't get in because you had no research, you're not going to correct that in 2 months.
Right.
If you didn't get in because of your GPA or your Mcat, you're not going to correct that in 2 months. So unless the circumstances are truly unusual, if you get rejected, and this is one of the hardest things I found for students to do, you probably need to forget about the very next cycle.
That's right.
You need to go on your fact-finding mission to find out what your perceived weaknesses and address them. And that usually will take a year for you to really address them to be competitive for the next time.
Right.
But I can't tell you how many times students, they just can't wait. I mean, the idea of waiting a year for their dream is for many unfathomable, and they just can't do it. There have been many times when I've given a student that advice and they didn't take it. They just went ahead and applied again anyway.
Yep.
But when you do that, now you can wind up. Now, not only are you a reapplicant next time you apply, you're a third-time applicant, and that automatically has some stigma to it. Just in the head of the admissions committee members, I'm telling you, when the admissions committee looks at somebody who's a reapplicant, it looks like resilience, persistence. This is a fighter. This is somebody who knows what they want, and they're not going to let anything get in the way of their dreams. When we see a third-time applicant, it's hard not to have these thoughts seep in your head to say, listen, if this person applied to 16 medical schools the first time, and everybody found them lacking, and they applied to 16 medical schools the second time, and everybody found them lacking, then, we don't want to touch that. There must be something wrong with this candidate.
Right.
So that's why you need to be careful and not just reflexively reapply. You really need to do a fact-finding mission. You can, I'm happy to let your viewers know that on our website, just Google the Ohio State University College of Medicine. We have an admissions page, and on that admissions page is a tab called Tips and Advice. And there's a lot of things that we put on there to be helpful. And one is I've written a long essay on advice to the reapplicant. If you are in that situation, I hope that's helpful to you. There's an essay on there about medical school interview tips. Hopefully some of this is helpful. We mean for this to be helpful. As you can probably tell, I like to help people achieve their dreams.
Absolutely.
For me, being a doctor is a dream come true. And so I feel very blessed that my dream came true. So I want to help other people achieve their dreams. And some of the most frustrating things for us, people like you who are advising those who want to be doctors, and me who are advising people who want to be doctors, is when somebody really has the potential, but their strategy was all wrong.
Right.
And either they weren't getting good advice, or sometimes it's because they were, but they weren't taking that advice. Right. That's frustrating for us to see.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head. One of the things that, I often say is do not apply out of frustration. Apply when you are ready. And that's, unfortunately, so many times I see people just, I just want to apply. I just want to apply. And I'm like,
oh my
you
goodness.
don't just want to
see what'll happen.
Yeah.
I just want to see what'll happen this cycle.
Right.
But you're throwing away a cycle.
Exactly.
If you apply when you know you haven't put your best foot forward,
right.
You're throwing away. And I know you got your fingers crossed that some school is going to take a chance on you. But yeah. Somebody somewhere is gonna. I just want to see. But if you don't get in, now you've thrown away a cycle, and now all of a sudden you're in a different category. You're a reapplicant.
Yeah. Yeah. Or a third applicant.
Yeah. Yes.
Right. Mm-hmm. And, you know, the thing that you also talked about was, you know, when you throw away a cycle, realize that you're probably not doing anything to potentially make yourself a more attractive candidate for the next cycle if you don't get in for the cycle that you're applying, which means then you would have to wait yet another year before you could apply again. So, you know, the time that you're trying to save, you're actually probably wasting more time. And so that's
and you're hurting yourself if you don't get in.
Correct. And you're actually hurting your chances. So, you know, oftentimes I will tell people just pump the brakes a little bit. If you take a year or so and make yourself the best applicant that you can be, especially if you haven't applied before, then you're much more likely to be someone that medical schools will look at. So yeah, that's very common mistake. Very common mistake. Any other common mistakes you want to mention? I know those were the main ones.
Those are the main things I want to get out, but I'm happy to, so tell me how your setup is working. Are they able to ask you questions?
Yeah, so they're asking, they are asking some questions.
Well, let's get to some of their questions.
Absolutely. So, I think Janelia asked the question about what if, her GPA, she's currently in college. What if her GPA is currently a 3.4? She hasn't taken the Mcat yet. But she's kind of wondering what should she do. She was asking at one point, should she consider a special master's program? So that's kind of her question. She has a 3.4 and she's a science major. But she's wondering, I guess she's going to be graduating in 2019. Should she consider now a special master's program?
Not necessarily. 3.4 is in the game. So Janelia and all of your listeners should know about the MSAR, Medical School Admissions Requirements. That is a document that you can get at the Association of American Medical Colleges website. So AAMC.org. You should be writing this down. Those are the most important initials for the pre-med student. AAMC.org. You go to that website. That is the Association of American Medical Colleges, which is kind of the umbrella organization for all of the MD schools in the U.S. and Canada. On that website, you will find a publication called Medical School Admissions Requirements, MSAR, and it lists all of the 100, now about 150 medical schools, and everything about them you want to know.
Right.
One of the most important things it lists are the academic metrics. So you will find on there not only the average GPA and the average MCAT at that school, but the range. And I'm saying this to Janelia because 3.4 is in there. I mean, us at Ohio State, our range for the GPA, now our average is 3.7, but our range is 3.0 to 4.0.
Right.
So 3.4 is in there.
Right.
So, what is it on the lower end? Yes, but it's certainly in range. We have, Janelia, we have some medical students who have a GPA less than 3.4. Of course, the other side of the academic metrics is the MCAT. So a lot of it will depend on your MCAT. So I wouldn't necessarily take yourself out of the game because of that 3.4 now and think about master's degree. The question is, are you coming to a point where you feel like you can prepare to put your very best foot forward on that MCAT? Because a strong MCAT and a 3.4 is, I mean, that plays.
Yeah.
That's in the game.
Thank you for that. See, Janelia, I told you. Awesome. Courtney has a question. She has a pretty interesting question. She was diagnosed with MS just after graduating, so she has some cognitive issues, and she's afraid to disclose that on her application. She's wondering if she should.
So good question. So part of diversity is also bringing into the medical profession persons who have different physical abilities, and medical schools understand that because imagine what a doctor who has some health challenges imagine what they can bring to patient care. Imagine the empathy that they can have for their patients. So regarding the cognitive impairment, now again, you've got to be able to demonstrate that you can do well in medical school. So is the cognitive difficulty impairing your GPA and your Mcat? That's a question. But the other issue is, have you had accommodations for taking your tests in college and in medical school? So what I would recommend that she do is at her university, if she's at a university now, maybe have a meeting with the Office of Disability Services to be evaluated to see if she would qualify for things like if she needs it, they would test her. If she needs additional testing time, if she qualifies for accommodations for taking a test. Often, if you qualify for that in college, then you can also get accommodations in medical school to take the exams and accommodations on the Mcat. But I know to get accommodations for the Mcat, it has to usually go through your university's Office of Disability Services. So God bless you. I love the fact that you want to be a doctor, and I think you can be a very good doctor. I'm just not, when you say cognitive impairment, it all just depends on how that impacts your ability to take in information, and that'll be reflected in your GPA and your Mcat.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Jess has a question. Her question is, what happens if a person has no access to a 1-year master's program, but is taking pre-med, prereqs as a non-degree student?
So you have to just do what your life will allow you to do. So if I rate, there are 3 strategies. Let's say you want to apply to medical school and your undergraduate record is not competitive for medical school. So you need to buttress it. You need to get some more academic preparation. You need to prove to medical school admissions committees that hey, maybe I didn't do that well then, but I do have what it takes. There are 3 strategies. In descending order of success, in my opinion, the 1-year master's degree program is probably the best. Being a full-time student in a full-time dedicated post-baccalaureate program, and those are usually undergraduate courses, is second. And last, I'm going to say doing this, basically taking classes a la carte. So you're working, you take a chemistry course here. Next year, you might take a biology course. You're kind of doing it on your own. That helps. But of those 3 strategies, I'd say that probably is the least helpful. Why do I say that? Because admissions committees, they kind of want to know what you can do with multitasking and when you've got a big full-time load. So let's say you had an undergraduate record that is not competitive, and let's say over 4 years, you take a class here, a class there, a class here, a class there, and you got A's on all of them. Well, that's good. Your GPA on those post-bac classes will be a 4.0, but the admissions committee will look and they say, yeah, but she took a total of 16 credit hours over 4 years. And while it's not fair, some snarky person in the room will say, well, anybody can get an A if they're just taking one class. What we want to see is what can you do when you're taking 4 classes at the same time, 5 classes at the same time. So, but that being said, you have to do what your life allows you to do. And so if that's the best that you can do, then go for it, because remember, we have this other great equalizer called the Mcat. So if that's the best you can do in terms of taking classes, just taking them part-time as a non-degree student, 1 class here, 1 class there, if that's enough to prepare you to do well for the Mcat, then good for you.
Right. And I mean, to that point also, I want to say, I've had students ask about the load, right? Don't medical schools want to see you have, a larger load of classes so that you can, so that you can prove that you can take on medical schools, the rigors of medical school curricula? And my answer to that question is typically yes, absolutely, but not at the expense of the grade. So if you know that strategy, exactly, you have to strategize. And so not at the expense of the grade. So if you know that, you're the head of your household and you have, a family to take care of and you have to work and option 3 is your best option, then be smart about it. Don't take, 4 courses at the same time when you have to work 40 hours and then you have to drive your son to soccer and you have to do this, do that, not at the expense of the grade. So it doesn't make sense to get all C's, but you took 4 courses when you could have taken maybe 1 or 2 and gotten an A. So
I agree.
Strategy.
I agree. Yeah. So it's all about strategy. In that case, a person like what you just mentioned, who has this very full life, in addition to needing to take courses, it would be best for them to take that one course, but all the time be kind of nipping away at the MCAT prep book and preparing for the MCAT. Right.
Awesome. Really good questions, guys. I think I have, let's see. Okay, I have one. Tanisha. Hey, Tanisha. So she's, so how long should you study for the MCAT before you take it? She's been out of school at least 7 years. She has a BA. She's currently taking Kaplan and plans on applying to a post-bac program before medical school so that she can take the MCAT in order to get in. So Tanisha basically is she's taking the MCAT so that she can get into the post-bac program because that's one of the requirements, if you will, of the post-bac program.
Oh, okay. Well, that's unfortunate that they would. That's a little odd because you might need those courses in the post-bac program to do well on the MCAT.
That's what I said.
So I wonder why they're doing it backwards like that. It's probably because they were set up a long time ago for students who applied to medical school and didn't get in, and they already have an MCAT score.
Yeah,
that's probably what's going on there.
Correct.
In terms of time, so I've asked students who did very well on the MCAT. I usually like to ask them how they prepared. The most common thing I hear is that they started preparing anywhere from 4 to 6 months before the test. At least early on, 2 to 3 hours a day. As they get closer to the MCAT, more like 4 hours a day. And in that last month, lots and lots and lots of practice questions and full-length practice MCATs. The AAMC, that website I mentioned to you before, they actually have full-length practice MCATs on there. I think they might have 3 or 4. They're not free. There's a price for them. I don't think it may be $20 or something. But so I would think about that. 4 to 6 months before the test date. 2 hours early on, 4 hours maybe in the last 2 months, and take all of the full-length practice MCATs you can get your hand on.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. And I think you're right, because I have a couple of students that I'm working with now, one in particular who also is applying for a post-bac program, a special master's program, and I think she's actually applying to 2, and they both require the MCAT. But again, those are probably for people who applied, didn't get in. Now, one of the programs that she's applying for also will take the GRE instead of the MCAT. So my suggestion to her was take the GRE because you might need the courses in the post-bac in order to do well on the MCAT rather than take an MCAT, bomb it, feel bad about bombing the MCAT, and now having to redeem yourself with that MCAT score.
And that's such a good advice, Doctor, because that bombed MCAT isn't going away.
Right.
Again, it's not like the ACT. It's not like you can decide to not send it in. It's going to be there. It's going to be on your application.
It's like rock and roll. It's here to stay.
Yes. So no, I think that's very wise. Take the GRE.
Right. Milan has a question. He asks, how many hours of volunteering do you think is appropriate?
So we get this question a lot. I don't like for people to think that there's a threshold. Like if I tell you 100, don't think that if you only did 99, you're not going to get in. But I'll give you some averages. It seems like for pure community service, we see students have done an average of about 100 hours or more.
Right.
For healthcare-related experiences, volunteering at a nursing home, volunteering at a hospital, free clinic, shadowing a physician, we see on average 40 hours or more. Some people have 300 hours,
right.
But our admissions committee likes to see at least 40 of those hours. And that doesn't have to all be physician shadowing. Mm-hmm. If you are volunteering in a hospital, that gets it. That is
healthcare related
experience. I'll take a moment to say this. Students will often ask is the healthcare related experience more valuable if it is direct patient contact.
Right.
Yes, it is.
But we understand that as an undergraduate student, you're probably not going to have too much direct patient contact. So don't worry about that. And I had one student that I always think of who volunteered in the emergency room, and he was pretty bummed out because the 3 hours he was there volunteering,
they had him in a stock room,
kind of stacking boxes. And he thought, wow, this was such a waste. But I told him, no, it isn't. You're still helping out the emergency room.
That's
you
right.
are doing something that helped the emergency room do their job of delivering care. Mm-hmm. And so you count those hours. I know it might not have been sexy, but
mm-hmm.
you count those hours. You were volunteering in a hospital, and that does count.
Right. Awesome. And do we have time for 2 more questions?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. We'll ask 2 more questions. So I'll ask Bintu's question. Bintu is a student that I've been working with, and her question is, as a reapplicant, do you recommend applying to both MD and DO schools, as well as increasing the number of medical schools that you apply to?
Usually it's smart to increase the number of schools that you've applied to. But again, I can't stress enough, the impetus is on you if you were not accepted mm-hmm. to find out why.
Right.
And that means picking up the phone and calling them. If you are in the same city as one or more of the medical schools you apply to, that means going to talk to somebody in the admissions office. They have your application. Somewhere there's a paper trail that says you were lacking in this area or that area. You need to find that out and correct it before you reapply.
Right.
But yes, usually increasing the number of schools you apply to mm-hmm. is smart. If you applied to 16 and didn't get in, this time apply to 30.
Right.
And she had another part of the question there.
Her question was, do you recommend applying to both MD and DO schools?
So that depends. So I'm going to say some things here that are true. It is less competitive to get into a DO school. Mm-hmm. Now, that's no knock on DOs. That's just because most people that want to go to medical school, right. they're thinking MD school. So right. most pre-meds are applying to MD schools, mm-hmm. which is what makes it a little bit easier to get into a DO school. Mm-hmm. But DOs do everything that MDs do.
Right.
In fact, there could be, in fact, they probably do a better job in DO school at teaching about nutrition. That's something that's really kind of weakly covered in MD schools. So I would say that can be a good idea, but I will say this though. Now, DO schools, they know this. They know what I just said. Mm-hmm. They don't like it if they think the only reason you're applying is because you think it might be easier to get in.
Right.
They want to know that you're applying to the DO school because you believe in the DO philosophy.
Right.
Because you want to be a DO. And so most of them will require, in addition to everything else they require, mm-hmm. A letter of recommendation from a DO. So that you shadow the DO. Because they don't want to just think that, oh, you're just applying to us because you couldn't get into the MD school.
Right.
So keep that in mind. But so can that be good for you? Now, if you've read about DO schools, about their mission, and you like it, I'm talking to the person that asked the question now, mm-hmm. then by all means, apply to both MD and DO mm-hmm. schools. Find a DO that you can spend some time with, mm-hmm. talk to, shadow, and then ask him or her if they would be willing to write you a letter of recommendation.
Right. Absolutely. And certainly that was, my case, that I applied both MD and DO, and I ended up having a mentor who was a DO, and I really liked the DO philosophy, and I actually got accepted to both MD and DO schools. I chose to go to a DO school because I just liked the philosophy. So certainly, it can be something that if you think that the philosophy is something that you would like to incorporate into your practice as a physician, then certainly you can apply for that reason. Certainly it will increase the number of schools that you would apply to potentially, depending on if you apply to a lot of MD and a lot of DO schools. So there's that benefit as well. But you're right. You're going to have to kind of prove that it is something that you truly, genuinely are interested in.
Right.
So
absolutely. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I'll ask this last question because I don't want to take up your entire night. You're an interventional cardiologist, so I get it. So Belle asks, what does it mean when a medical school is just holding on to your application? No interviews, no invites or rejections. So Belle applied this cycle and she's just in a holding pattern. So what does that mean for her? And she applied early, actually.
It means be patient. It's a long process. Now we're towards the end of it now. It's March, but it means be patient. If you were clearly not competitive, you would have been rejected by now.
I tell her that every time.
Now, but it is late, and most places are probably coming to the end of their interview slots. So it's not a bad thing to call up the admissions office and just inquire about the status of your application. Maybe she's done that, and they are set, and they told her you're in a holding pattern. But I would just hang in there. Nothing is over until you get that final disposition. I can also tell you something that we're dealing with, and we deal with it every year this time, because students have been getting accepted since October. Mm-hmm. So since students are getting accepted, we have, and it happened actually this morning. So this morning was an interview day, where we will have, as it gets into February and March, interview slots where people will call us up and say thanks, but no thanks. Mm-hmm. They've already decided, they got into their first choice medical school.
Right.
And now we've got a spot that's opened up. And so we're going to call somebody and ask them if they want to interview.
Right.
So hang in there. Some interview spots will be opening up. And if it turns out that this cycle is not successful, don't give up.
Mm-hmm.
Remember what we've been talking about.
Right.
Read my essay on being a reapplicant. I can tell you there are a lot of good doctors.
Right.
Who did not get into medical school the first time they applied.
That's right.
But right now, they are living their dream as a doctor.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you so much for that. I mean, that's a conversation that Belle and I have had. You know, we've had this conversation over and over about just, being patient, just kind of holding on, because you just never know. Here sitting on this side of the process, it seems like all hope is lost. But we don't know what's going on the other side. And that's really important to understand the process from the side of the admissions committee. And so once you understand the admissions process from the side of the admissions committee, and not just as an applicant, you kind of realize okay, you might still be in the running. I can
tell you our last 4 interview days, we got an email the night before that somebody was pulling out of the interview. So hang in there. And what that means is this spot opens up. Now, unfortunately, when somebody tells us the night before, it's too late for us to call somebody. Right. So that's the other thing. So admissions cycle etiquette.
Right.
If you've applied to 16 schools and you interview early at your dream school and you get accepted and you know that's where you want to go, it is the proper and courteous thing to do to decline your interviews at these other schools. And once you've decided that you're not going to go to, say, school X, don't wait until the night before to tell them that, or the morning of, or just be a no-show, because that's somebody else there's somebody holding on, like the student we're talking about now, waiting for an interview.
That's right.
So sometimes we forget that once we've been accepted, then you're in a whole different category.
We don't check our email anymore.
Yeah, life is good now. I've been accepted. But don't forget that there are other students who are on pins and needles, waiting. So be a professional and be courteous about it. Once you've been accepted, if you know you don't want interview at the last 3 schools on your list. Let them know early so they can get somebody else in there.
Right. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Capers. This has been so helpful. I've gotten so many thank yous and, this is me and this is so helpful. This is encouraging. I've gotten so many of those comments going through. And I just want to thank you so much. You've reinforced a lot of the things that I talk about with my students. So it's good to know that I know what I'm talking about.
You absolutely do. Yes. Strategy. Yep.
So this is extremely helpful. And I just want to thank you again for all that you do. I know you work a lot in terms of diversity. You touched upon that just a little bit, but I know you are on Twitter. You're also kind of one of the people who kind of pushes the Black Men in Medicine hashtag as well. So if you go to Twitter, follow Dr. Capers at Dr. Quinn, Quinn, Capers, Capers 4 for Dr. Quinn Capers the 4th. Follow him on Twitter. He has a lot of inspirational things. He will post all of his interview days. He even posted exercising today between meetings. And my question was, is he getting ready for this meeting? That's right. Heart healthy, because he's an interventional cardiologist. And I believe that the nor'easter storm that's going on right now is called Winter Storm Quinn. So
I heard that.
Yeah.
Yes.
So you came with the cold, hard facts.
There you go. Oh, that's wonderful segue.
That's right.
Wonderful.
Well, thank you so much. And I just want to, really again extend my appreciation to you. So, I'm really hoping to work with you in the future. And, yeah.
Sure. I look forward to it. Now, will this be, are you going to post this anywhere? Is this going to be posted on YouTube or
this will be posted
you have a link
on
to
Facebook? I can pull it down from Facebook or I can download it from Facebook, post it on YouTube. Definitely I'll be, putting it out so that on Twitter people can access it as well. So the link to YouTube will also go, on Twitter so that you can access it.
Okay, good. Please do that because I want other people to have access to this conversation.
Absolutely. Will do.
Okay.
All right. You have a good night. And those of you who are on, go ahead and stay on. I'm going to just say some last words. Thank you so much, Dr.
Thank you very much. Yep. God bless.
Take care. You too. All right, everyone. How helpful was that? Oh my gosh. That was so helpful. Oh my goodness. He was amazing. And I know that many of you really enjoyed that session. It couldn't have gone any better. It really couldn't have. The technology was great. He was great. All your questions were right on point. So many of you that I work with and talk to on a regular basis, I want to thank you guys, all of you, for coming on and asking those pertinent questions. And I hope that you see the similarities in many of the things that we talk about, one-on-one as well as a group. Many of you asked questions that I think we've kind of discussed the answer, but I think it's important to always, quote unquote, get a second opinion, right? If you're a patient, then your doctor may recommend, hey, get a second opinion, right? Because if I feel that this is your situation, this is what might work for you, there's no reason that I wouldn't necessarily ask someone else to give you their opinion because maybe they have a different approach or maybe they agree with what I've said. And so that will help to solidify for you what your plan would be. So again, I really hope that this was helpful. Remember the pitfalls that he talked about, the kind of do's and don'ts, especially the don'ts of applying to medical school. Apply when you're ready. Take the Mcat when you are ready. Don't apply out of frustration. Apply to the right number of schools, at least 16 schools, he said. Certainly I will add, applying to the right schools. That's the other thing. Applying to schools that will look at you. And that means doing what he said, going to the MSAR on AAMC, going to the MSAR and looking at those schools and their requirements and being very realistic with yourself about where you fall in terms of, your GPA, your Mcat score, and all the other requirements that you need in order to get into medical school. So I want to just thank you again for joining me. Let me see if there are any other questions. Yeah, Dr. Capers is awesome. Alex says, I got to put this on the screen because I have to prove to my husband that I did tell you guys to subscribe to his podcast. So my husband has a podcast. It's called Docs Outside the Box. Alex Morrow obviously is a subscriber. He says Dr. Capers is awesome. Also check out Dr. Darko's podcast. Just started listening on my drives and they are amazing as well. Yeah, my husband's pretty awesome. So thank you for that, Alex. Thank you again. And, yeah, I really hope you guys enjoyed this. Go ahead to the group and, post whatever gems you got out of this so that you can kind of share that with the other people in the group. Remember, this is a support group, right? The strategic pre-meds support group. So if you're not in the strategic pre-meds group, not the Dr. R.V. Darko pre-med strategies group, or page, but the strategic pre-meds group. If you're not in the group, go ahead and go on Facebook and search it. It'll show up. Answer the questions. Please, guys, you have to answer the questions. The reason I want you to answer the questions in order to join the group is because I don't want any spammers coming on that group. I don't want people just coming in and targeting you guys just to solicit you. You guys are gold to some people, okay? You guys are gold. And there are people who have come into the group that I've had to remove from the group because they're only there because you're liquid gold to them. You're just people that they want to solicit. So, go into the group, answer the questions if you haven't joined yet so that we can make sure that you are someone who, will provide, support, and other resources to your fellow members. And I'll be sure, and Janelia also will be sure to give you an approval to join the group. Okay. And, that's it, guys. I want you to have a really good night. If you're on the East Coast, be safe. There is, a major snowstorm out there. Just make sure that you're safe. If you want to find out more about me, again, I'm Dr. Renee Volney Darko, and you can find me on Pre-Med Strategies. Okay, premedstrategies.com. If you want to do a 30-minute free strategy session with me, go to premedstrategies.com and click contact me. It'll bring you down the page and it'll basically tell you, you can do a free strategy session. There's also like a little box on the bottom, like right corner, of the premedstrategies.com page. And you can book your free strategy session there. I really look forward to talking with you guys. I have a few appointments coming up. I have at least one appointment tomorrow and a few more coming up for the rest of the month. So be sure to join me if you would like to talk through your pre-med status. Okay? Take care, guys, and have a great, wonderful night.